Hello and good afternoon, everybody. Today I'm going to talk about voice. We often read a lot about voice from in the grammar books and in the other textbooks also, and we have to solve some exercises based on voice. We generally call it voice change, but the moment we just hear about voice, our mind is just trained in such a way that we just start thinking that yes, now we have to change voice and what are the rules for it, but we don't even try to know that what are the basic reasons that for which we should know or we should learn the procedure of changing voices. What is the necessity of learning this? Why should we learn voice change? And voice change, what is its significance in introducing it in the grammar books? First of all, we should be at least aware of the aims and objectives behind introducing this thing in grammar. And let me tell you guys that voice is not anything it's not anything new that has been introduced in the books that the students should know and anything like that. In our real life also we need to use voice, and sometimes we ourselves are not aware of this fact that we are actually using voice in different forms. So here let me tell you about the necessity of voice and why should we learn it. Voice, we can say that in a sentence there is generally a subject and there is a verb, a doing word, and then it is generally followed by an object. And in case of the instruction that now change the voice, what we do, we just make an alteration, we just replace the subject and the object in between them, we just replace them in between them. And what we do, we just change the form of the verb according to the tense in which the sentence already is in. But let me tell you that why should we learn to change voice? Actually, voice is something that gives us the opportunity. Let me tell you in another way that voice is like an app. And nowadays we all know that there are several apps which are used in technology, modern technology, computer and smartphones and all that. Voice can be seen from the perspective of an app also, application also. As for example, voice, by changing voice, we have an opportunity of replacing the subjects with the objects and the objects in the subject. That is, if there is a sentence and someone tells you that here is a subject and a verb and object, can you use the object as a subject of the sentence? Can the subject can be put or can be given the form of an object without changing the meaning of it? So voice change is something using which as an app, using which as a tool, you can actually make the object the subject and put the subject in the place of the object. So it's an opportunity by using which we can replace the subject and the object in between them. But the beauty of it is the meaning of the sentence remains the same. And as far as the meaning is concerned, I'm also telling you that meaning obviously remains same, but the sense and the emphasis actually changes in case of voice change. Let me tell you something about voice in detail here. Generally, voice is classified into two major categories: active voice and passive voice. There is another kind of voice also, which that form is called is quasi-passive voice. I will talk about it later. Let me clarify this first these two things, active and passive. Suppose you just want to give much emphasis on the creator in comparison with the creation, then you should go ahead with the active voice. As for example, Shakespeare wrote the Macbeth. Here, by saying this, you are actually putting much emphasis on the creator than the creation. And then again, if you want to put much emphasis or stress If you want to stress out that what has been written, that's important, and who has written, that's comparatively less important. If you want to represent a sentence in such a way, putting more emphasis on the creator than on the creation, then you will have to go with active voice. But if you want to give more emphasis on the creation than the creator, then you should go ahead with the passive structure. As for example, if I say that the Macbeth was written by Shakespeare, by saying this sentence, I am actually putting much emphasis or stress, I am stressing out on the work, that is the creation. And we all turn the active into passive and passive into active. We all the time do so whenever we are distracted to change the voices, but only in some cases, only just a few students are there, few people are there who are actually aware of this fact that by changing voice we actually change the pressure of emphasis. So it happens here. So, and in case of our mother tongue, it could be Bengali or Hindi, we generally stress out the word that we have to stress out, we put much emphasis on it at the time of pronunciation. Yes, we put much stress on it, we make it accented. But at the time of reading, how can you do so? In English also, at the time of speaking, you can also do this by stressing out the creator sometimes and by stressing out the object also. But in the time of writing, you are not there to speak it out to someone. So how do you stress out the main word? So there, what you need to do is to use the active if you want to put much emphasis on the creator, and if you want to put much emphasis on the creation, then you will have to go with passive. But in most of the cases, we ourselves not remain aware of this fact that it happens whenever we just use the active or passive form. There are some other cases also where we are not aware of, suppose we are not aware of the person who has actually done the work, or who has actually done the work. If the person who is responsible for the work, if we are not aware of the person, then who is the man to put the blame on, or to put the responsibility on? In that case, what we prefer is to use the passive one. As for example, a man was killed last night, yes, or a wounded man was rescued. Last night a wounded man was rescued from the street. Who did it? That's not important. Or who killed the man? That is if also not important. If that information is not available right now, then how do you write this sentence? You just can't write that. You just can't say that X or someone killed a person last night. You can say this, but just because you don't know that who is the person to blame on or put the responsibility on, there what we do, we just use the passive voice. That someone was killed last night, or a man was killed. So what I want to say is that if we are not aware of the man who has done it, or the person who has done the work, where the subject is not obvious, not present there, what we do, we just go with the passive voice. And in some other cases also, those sentences are always written in passive voice. As for example, he was born in 1982. These types of sentences, in case of writing these types of sentences, the passive voice is generally used. So what I want to say, that friends and my students also, that it's okay that you have been told to change voice and all that, and you are doing it, and you can do it so well. That's good. There is nothing problem. There is nothing wrong in doing so. If you can solve them well, then what's the problem? But what I want to tell you is that you should also be aware of the fact that what is the necessity of learning voice and the many other grammatical exercises also which are there in your syllabus. You just don't need to jump to solve them. You need to think also what is the necessity of them, so that learning these things, learning the motive behind introducing these things in your syllabus, so that you can also use them in the field of writing skill. Here I would also like to say that most of the people think that grammar is something else and writing is something else, as these two things actually come into different portions in the grammar book also. But we need to think that there is a link, inseparable, indispensable link between these two things. Whatever you have learned in case of grammar, the rules, the authenticity, the rules, the regulations of making sentences in an authentic way, these rules you need to apply, and you should apply in the field of writing skill. The more you learn the grammar well, the more you can write the writing skills in a better way. Okay, so your knowledge of grammar will actually help you in the field of writing skill. So if the grammar portion is called a training period, then I can say that your writing skill is the large canvas or the field to play with, to do the marvel, to give the best of your performance. So what I would like to tell you is that you don't need to look at these two things from two separate viewpoints. These two things are not actually different from each other. They have a link, they have a connection. And dear friends and dear students also, one more thing, there is another type of voice also that we call quasi-passive. Quasi-passive actually means half passive. Quasi-passive is a kind of voice which is active in form or structure but passive in sense. So the voice which is active in form or structure but passive in sense, these types of voices are called quasi-passive. We often say that honey tastes sweet, or quinine tastes bitter. But can quinine say that I taste bitter myself? No. Quinine can be bitter, or quinine is bitter only when it is tasted. So if you look at the sentence, then you will think that as if quinine himself or itself is saying that he is bitter, as it is active in form. But you need to take the sense in a passive way. So these types of sentences are called quasi-passive. So dear friends, that's all for now. I will be back again. If you like my video, I would request you to share it with others, so that can others also be benefited by it. Okay, bye.